When we are talking about a production environment in SAP Business One, we need to make sure that we have our items set up correctly so the production process will not fall into any hiccups when we're gonna run our process. So to do that, we need to make sure that all our items, including the finished goods, the components, or any non-inventory item that you're gonna use as a resource, is set up correctly in Business One. So what we're gonna do today is through a series of examples of how you make sure that your item is set up correctly. We're going to see the different types of setups and items that we can use in a production environment in Business One. One thing that is worth to mention is that even though if you're not into a fully or complete production environment, you can still use the production module to kind of replicate a production line process that you may have in your company. So let's go and see the example. So my finished goods, my finished item is going to be called, just for the purpose of not confusing anyone, FG. So I have my item here. So the first thing is, if this is an item that we're gonna only manufacture or produce, when we do the first setting in the company, in this area right here, we may not need to mark this as a purchase item, because we're not going to purchase the item, we're just going to produce or manufacture the item. So that's the first thing that you need to consider. Then in the general tab, just one thing that is really important that we need to set for the item is if it's going to be serial or batch control. Why is this important? Because this will, especially for the components, this will determine how the issue method the system is going to follow when making that production order. For the finished goods, this will represent, as you may already know, that whenever you're receiving that finished goods, you will need to assign a serial number or a batch or lot number for that particular production. So for this example, we're going to create our finished goods as a serialized item, which means I will need to assign a serial number when we're receiving that production order. Then, if we go to our planning data, we need to set at least two things here. One, the planning method, and you have two options. You have MRP or none. And what this is going to do is, if you select none, but you may use the MRP capabilities in SAP, then this item will not be included in that MRP run because it was not marked to be part of that MRP. So if you're considering using MRP to help you decide how much and when do you need to have or produce your items, then I strongly suggest that you have this planning method marked as MRP. And the second one is what's the procurement method. And this is important because then if we run MRP, then MRP will know what type of document he will recommend us for this item. So if I set make, that means that I'm going to produce this, and the recommendation from MRP will be a production order. If I mark this as a buy item, that means that I'm not manufacturing this or producing this. I'm just buying this from a third party, from a vendor. And the recommendation the MRP will give me instead of a production order will be either a purchase request or purchase order. So for example, we're gonna just mark this make, since we know we're gonna manufacture or produce this item. Okay. All these orders may not be necessarily if we're gonna make it. If we're gonna buy it, and we're gonna see that in the components, we may use to add more information on this tab. This item is gonna ever be part of a bill of materials. This will be the issue method that the system will use for this item. So something important that I mentioned at the beginning is in the general tab, I can select if I can manage this item by either by serials or by batches. If I select either one of those two, serials or batches, this issue method automatically becomes manual. If I don't set any serial or batches, then my issue method can be backflush. But if I select one of the two, automatically this will be manual. And the second thing is that we could use or set a standard production cost for this item when it's going to be used in a production order. So for our example, we're going to manage this as a moving average, so there's no need to set a production standard cost in this. So this is my finished good. Let's go and see what other things we need to consider when we are using some of our items or components of that bill of materials that we're going to build to make these item in the company. So once again, not to confuse anyone, the name of our components are component one, which in this case, I'm gonna buy, I'm gonna keep in stock, and maybe I'd be able to sell it. So I'm gonna keep this mark as a sale item. If I know that I'm only buying this for my production process, I may just uncheck this because I'm never gonna sell this item. For this example, let's keep it mark as a sales item. I go back to my general tab, make my decision about if this is serial or batch control. This first component I'm gonna select that is neither serial or batch control. Then I'm gonna go to my planning data. I'm gonna keep this as an MRP planning method because I want the system to help me out to tell me when I need to replenish this component so I can keep the flow on the production floor going without any interruptions. And since I'm buying this item, my procurement method will be buy. When I buy items, then I may think about these options right here. At least the minimum order quantity and the order multiple. So minimum order quantity is the minimum quantity that you can place an order to a vendor. And the order multiple is not always used, but sometimes when you buy bulk items, you need to buy in increments of X amount of quantity. So let's say for this component, my minimum order quantity will be 10. But I can only buy multiple of 5. Let's say, for the packaging is 5 units per box or per envelope or whatever the packaging unit is. So I can only buy 15, 20, 25, 30, starting at 10 because 10 is the minimum quantity that I can order. And my lead time will tell the system, especially when running the MRP, how long it will take to get that material to my warehouse, to my door, so I can have it as part of my production process without any interruptions. Let's say in this case, 5 days. This is very, very important data that we need to set up when using a component as part of a bill of materials. Let me just update here. And then again, we go to production data. So since I did not select this component as being either batch control or serialized control, I can use as my issue method backflush, or I can do it manually. I can. In this case, I have the option to select either one. So for the sake of the exercise, we're gonna keep a backflush for this item. Okay. And I'm gonna have a second component. And this second component will be controlled by either serial or batch. So once again, the first thing that I do is what will be the type of material. It's going to be an inventory item, it's going to be a sales item, it's going to be a purchase item. Most likely, if this is part of something that I don't manufacture, I'm going to buy it, so I need to mark it as a purchase item. I'm going to have a stock of the items, so I just want to make sure that I just check that it's going to be an inventory item. And once again, if I'm sure I'm not going to sell it, I just can uncheck this and just leave it like that. Going back to my general tab, in this particular case, I'm going to select that this is going to be batch control. And I'm going to jump right off to the production data, which means that my issue method automatically is set up to manual. Then I go to my planning data. Again, I have my MRP. My procurement method will be buy. And let's say that this particular component, I can buy boxes or packages of 100, and that's also my order multiple 100. The lead time for these is 3 days. Okay. I'll update and save this. I'm gonna need something to pack my items, so let's include a box as part of the bill of materials. So I have a box that is gonna be this size. Again, I'm purchasing that. Box may not be sell it, and I'll keep it, this one as an inventory item, so I can use the MRP to help me make the replenishment of these items. I'm not going to control these by serial or batches. So if I go to production, I have the option to do backflush or manual. I'm going to leave it as backflush. Okay, so one more thing about items is that I can also set up a non-inventory item for some services or things that are, or tasks, or processes or procedures that you do, but are not necessarily a tangible item. Let's say as part of our process, we charge our customers for the handling of the whole process. So instead of using a resource, I can just set up an item that will be a non-inventory item. I'm not going to purchase this, but I'm going to include it on my sales orders. And the item type, instead of being an item, will be labor. And that makes this an inventory item automatically. I'm not going to create any batches for my planning data. I don't need to do an MRP for this because I'm not going to have an inventory of these items. So you can either leave it as MRP or just select none. And it won't matter if you select buy or making here, because we're not going to do an MRP. We're not going to procure this item because it's just an intangible or a service. And we don't need this, and we don't need to do any of this. Well, the backflush, the issue method, we're going to need. And most of these non-inventory items can be just backflush. There's no need to do it manual unless you want to have the control to make that issue at a certain point or a certain time in the process. Okay. So we have all our items ready to be used in a production environment.